Welcome everyone to another episode of the Men's Room. Today we're going to be having a bit of a general conversation between myself and Linda, and just touching upon a few topics that have been crossing through our minds. And one of the ones that I wanted to touch upon firstly is relationships and how to know you found the right one when it's that sort of time. Like for you, back then there wasn't Tinder or there wasn't any of these dating apps. And how exactly did you just know Jerry was the right one for you?
Okay, so that's a really great question to start with. And you're right, there really wasn't the apps, or at least I wasn't using the apps during that time. I think that's when they were introduced. And honestly, I'm a person that likes to get involved in activities. And so I was in a business club, I was in a sorority, and we did social services. And so there was another club that we did services. And so I was in like three different clubs. And really, it was all about like being in those spaces where you could have a conversation. And I will kid you not, there were more women in these circles or these clubs and activities than there were guys. And so my husband was actually one of the very few men that were in this circle. And so he was the quiet guy, so he'd be observing and watching, and ladies would be doing all the talking. I can remember when I was in registration, and I had my advisor, and he was talking about how I did all the talking for Jerry, because we're both accounting majors. So really, what I would say is, I don't know that that the person's the right person in that moment when you're getting to know people. But what I'll say is, I looked to the interactions in his character. So he had this character where he was very thoughtful and kind. And so we were friends long before we did the dating thing. And so really, I mean, even when we were dating, he'd do nice things, like he'd fill up my car, he'd buy my groceries. He would actually sit and listen as I would talk about different things. And sometimes it was even about other guys.
Just being a gentleman.
Yes, that is right. He was being a gentleman. And so that really is, for me, having shared values, having, in our case, we had the shared major. We were both found out that we were the oldest. So we would set the bar for the family dynamics. We both lived in the state all of our lives. We wanted to just stay in the same state. And so really, it was the friendship where you took the time to get to know someone. It wasn't this, oh, I want to date someone and get married, have kids, buy the house, and all of that. That was never really in the equation. Now, I will say, we didn't really date all that long. We dated for about 7 months and got married. So, and I was 1 year further in school. So I'm like, I don't want to wait for a whole another year or two and have a long engagement. I said, oh, let's just do it and now do the long engagement. And I thought that was fine. I didn't see the need to wait and wait for 2 years for something. I don't know. People plan so much for the party. And to me, it's more about get the timing right for how you want to integrate your lives. So that's a really great question. So for me, I never thought of doing it any other way. I just was open to getting to know someone.
So it's sort of interesting. So would you say that 7 months of dating are more so like a light relationship rather than dating? Because if you've gone for 7 months of dating, you may as well say you're in a relationship at that point of some sort.
Oh, yeah, I would say that happened fairly exclusively right away. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I've noticed there's a trend with relationships at the moment. Like myself trying to get into the dating game. There's not a lot of women out there that like a gentleman, someone who's willing to open the door for them, someone who wants to have things done for them, and just be taken care of in a way that's not babying them, but just more so showing them that you care for that person. And nowadays, everything is just about lust. They just want a quick 2 second hookup, and they're already gone by the end of the night. Like you can't even talk about things or anything like that. And that's where I think it's a bit of a different dynamic compared to when you were dating and stuff like that, because you probably had some dating websites, but there was no hookup websites 20 years ago. And that's the thing. It's a completely different dynamic now. And that's where I wanted to touch upon how you went about dating and things like that, and how the relationship was formed. Because today it's a lot harder, especially if there's a big divide between men and women right now. There's a massive population of males in their 20s and 30s that are single and have stayed single for years because they don't want to deal with the heartache, or they have trouble just reaching out to girls. They don't have the confidence to walk up to them. Or the other thing is, girls can pick and choose who they want. Guys just hope that they're going to get accepted by someone, because a girl can get 50 likes in one day on these dating websites, and a guy would be lucky to get one like in a month. Like, it's a very one-sided sort of thing, and that's where it's interesting to observe these sort of trends and patterns and understand them. And myself, I'm on a couple of dating websites, but they're not that good. So I'm a believer for getting out there to events and doing that sort of stuff, and that's where it's trying to find what you enjoy, what makes you sort of happy, what you sort of get fulfilled by, and then getting out there and doing those types of things. So it could be going out to a car show or something like that, and just getting to know people and being willing to accept that you might mess up a couple of conversations. You might not be able to talk to everyone there how you want, but at least you'll make some friends and you'll slowly gain that confidence, and you might even meet some other people. So, what's your thoughts on how to meet the right sort of person from your perspective? Because it has been some time, but I don't know if you've observed trends within your kids and stuff like that, and how they've gone through the same sort of rough relationship or the rough times, and they're struggling. And I wonder if it's because of these apps, instead of just going out there and meeting people in person, but just asking.
That's a really interesting question, because I'm thinking about both my friend groups, which range in age from 20 something up to 50 something. So I got a wide range. And I think that things are similar. I think that because of the pandemic, because of that, I think it contributes into people not being able to communicate in quite the same way. So I think people, they show up on a screen or they show up on a platform in one way, but when you meet them in person, they might show up a little differently. And so how do you meet someone and really know who you're getting in front of you? And so I think that is a large thing. And so I always have advocated to people, go to the places and spaces where your interests lie and have a conversation. And yes, opening up and having a conversation, if you're a shy person, might be a little hard. But what I've found is that there's always, for every shy person, there's somebody that's talkative and can carry a conversation. And those are the people that usually will talk to each other, but not always. Sometimes the quiet people will put a conversation together. And I guess another thing too is so many people are concerned with what other people think of them. Are they good enough, cool enough, interesting enough? And so they're so worried about that they forget to just show up in the way that they want to present themselves. And so I think that, I've said to my kids, especially because they're the older two do date and have dated. And I said, just be who you are, and also be your own person. That's another thing. I see a lot of people want to show up and have that relationship, and they're more excited about the relationship than they are about the relationship they have with themselves and what they want. And so all of a sudden they lose themselves in this relationship because they do everything with the person, and so they don't know how to be separate. So I always say,
Well, oh, you go. Sorry.
that's okay. Have your separate interests, but then also have the things that bring you together, and do those too. So that way, everyone has their own thing that they bring to the relationship. The relationship doesn't exist just to have someone to be with. It's that additive thing.
That's where I've been studying relationships and how they form and understanding them at a deeper level. And sometimes it's not good to be with someone that has exactly the same interests and likes. Sometimes it's good to be with someone that has the polar opposite, because you're able to discover that you might like some of their likes and they might like some of your things. And it's also setting boundaries. Boundaries is a big thing that a lot of people don't have nowadays, saying, I just need to go do this, or I need to take some time just to think about things, and understanding that not everything can happen in 2 seconds. The other one is different types of people. So usually from what I've studied and what I'm looking at right now, there's people pleasers out there. So the good boy sort of terminology, and it's a man who's willing to say yes to everything and not willing to do something for himself, not willing to take time to learn who he is and how he is, and really understand what he wants from life. And that's where it's an interesting phenomenon. Usually these guys come from childhood trauma. They come from abusive pasts or neglectment, other types of things like that. And it's interesting to watch because I've seen it with my mates, and like I'm a bit of a people pleaser as well because I've got previous trauma from my childhood as well. So I resonate extremely well with that. And it goes to the same for women, where you have, I think it's called the codependent woman, which she just wants to do everything with the partner, and she has no boundaries or she has no likes and dislikes. She just agrees with whatever the partner says. And sometimes those relationships can really flourish, and other times they end up teetering off and dying because the person refuses to find what they like. They go 5 years or 10 years down the line, they might have a couple of kids, and then all of a sudden there's problems arising because they refuse to see in the beginning that they didn't really have anything going for them. They were willing just to participate in the beginning as well. And it's an interesting phenomenon that I've been studying and trying to understand, because a lot of guys will be with someone, think they love someone, but little do they know they don't love the person. They love the qualities and traits of them, but it's not until they're told these sort of things do they understand. And once you self-reflect, and you might like the qualities and traits of a certain female because she's kind and caring or empathetic, and she's willing to have some active listening and stuff, and take time to get to know you. And other times there might be qualities and stuff like that of being strongly independent, being fierce, being stern, qualities like that. So it is finding what you like and asking these deeper rooted questions and looking back at previous relationships and saying, well, she had these types of qualities. I liked these types of qualities, but if I want to find someone I'm going to be truly happy with, I need more of a range of qualities or more of a range of something like that, because it's easy to get with someone in the short term, fall head over heels, but it's hard to actually think in the future. And a lot of relationships, it's not until you like it. Sometimes it happens early on, sometimes it happens like after a year or two, but asking those deep rooted questions of where do you see yourself in a year, 2, 5, 10 years, and what's your dreams and aspirations that you have? Like, what do you want to be doing with your life? Where do you want to be going? Because you want to find someone that's willing to build your dream up with you, or you build each other's dreams up. You go together, because you don't want opposing dreams of one that wants to stay at home 24/7 and the other one wants to travel the world. That will never work. You want a couple that's willing to travel the world everywhere, or stay at home and work on their own business, or do things like this, or they could even be running their own businesses, but they support each other. They understand these things. They've come to a clear communications about it, because that's the essential thing in the whole lot of it, clear communications. And sometimes you have to have clear and open communication with yourself to first understand who you are and what you're about, so that then you can approach women and sort of get into that dating game, understand what is right for you. And it's not until you've sort of looked around and you've dated a few women, you're like, I like these qualities, I like these sort of features. If they're good looking, that's just a bonus. But realistically, you should be attracted to the personality first and then looks second, because looks can matter, but at the end of the day, it's not the determining factor of someone. It's their personality. And if your personalities don't mesh, then there will be problems arise. There'll be breakdowns in communication. And sometimes you can overcome this with communication and time, but it's not easy. And that's where I was looking at the statistic the other day. Someone said that 50% of marriages, all marriages, end up divorced. It's not quite the case. It's 37% of marriages for the first marriage end up divorced, or about 35, 37. Second time marriages are 65%, and third time marriages are like 79 or 80%, with a divorce rate. So it's because they taken the previous divorces and stuff, and it stacks up. But there's a common underlying theme there. It's a lot of those people haven't taken the time to actually get to know the person, to figure out these deep rooted questions, because they often get with them out of lust or misplaced love, and then problems arise down in the future, or they have kids and just they sort of grow apart over time. and sometimes that bridge can be healed again, that gap can be brought back together, but it takes a lot of work from both parties. So then you'll have another phenomenon that I've seen getting around really a lot, which I don't really agree with too much, is open and poly relationships. Open relationships is just where you're sleeping with anyone and everyone, and it's not a good, healthy way to be. I believe everyone should only have one partner at the end of the day. Everyone should have someone that they can feel safe and secure with. And like there's been a massive rise in poly relationships, and that's an interesting phenomenon in and of itself, where you don't necessarily have one husband, but you might have two, three, or five husbands. And it's going between them and giving equal love, but a lot of times they break down because of the lack of communication or jealousy or other types of issues that happen. And it's an interesting relationship concept, and there are other ones out there, but open and poly relationships are probably the most common alternative relationships at the moment. I don't know if you've seen similar sort of trends with friends groups that you've had where you'll have mates in an open relationship and all of a sudden everything goes pear-shaped or in a poly relationship. They're not too common. It depends on which circles that you're in. So
Yes, and so I've seen all kinds of different relationships, whether it's in my circle or family or just, social media, I guess, where they describe the different types of relationships. And yes, when you talk about, like, I'm gonna bring it full circle here, but when you talk about like knowing what you value and what qualities are important and having that conversation of where the other person sees themselves, so you know where you stand for your values and what you want to do in the future, and you're discussing through open communication with a potential or your existing partner about what that is. I think that's really important. And even talking about what you just talked about, whether or not the relationship is going to be dating where you're exclusive or dating where you're dating other people, whether or not you are going to be monogamous, open to open relationships or to different types of relationships, just as you have mentioned. All of those are important conversations. And I think sometimes people like go into these relationships and don't always have these discussions, and so then they become blindsided and things can go severely wrong. And so I think what you talked about too, even with the statistics on divorce rates, it makes perfect sense that the percentage would go up with each additional relationship if you haven't taken the time to figure out what was going incorrectly, is whether it's communication was poor, whether or not you were out there being a people pleaser, or you happen to have some codependency issues. All of these things contribute into how you move through relationships and how you would go through each and subsequent one thereafter. So what I have to say is that I can see why men and women can get really frustrated with relationships, because not only do you have the different dynamics of whether or not you have a traditional view of relationships and marriage, and or whether you have openness for other types of relationships. You've got even the scenario where men used to be the providers and did the working. And then you've got, women such as myself that we get thrown into the model where, I'm pulling a job, my husband's pulling a job, but yet there's all of the other things that need to happen for the family. And so, that's always enters the picture. But I think really you hit upon it earlier on, and you just talked about how people need to not lose themselves in their relationships, not be too quick to jump into the relationship and want to move things physically fast, because I think that you're running down the track that you're going to fulfill the lesser desire, and then that's going to fade away. And then what are you going to have? So take the time to get to know people. And I guess the third thing in this conversation is really don't worry about following some predetermined timeline and being in love with the relationship. work on building the relationship and communication so you're in love with the person that you're in the relationship with, and making sure that it's value added, and that it's, there's things that would arise out of the relationship as an additive rather than a subtraction.
Yeah. So that's the one thing I was going to touch upon as well is how does one exactly start pushing themselves into these types of events? How does one get out there? Because I personally know how to do some of these things, but I didn't know if you had any any tips and stuff to overcome anxiety or stuff like that. I didn't know because I'm pretty sure that you're an extrovert, so it's easier for you to get out there and push yourself into these networking events. But people who are introverted, or a bit of both, an introvert who's also an extrovert at times, it's bit more difficult to be able to overcome these fears and worries and sometimes overthinking in these events. And it's an interesting thing because I suffer from a bit of a social anxiety myself, and I can handle small crowds, but anything larger than 5 to 10 people, that's when I sort of become a bit intimidated or a bit anxious. And it's learning in those times I need to do more of those types of events because it teaches me what I need to do and how to grow by pushing those limits. And a lot of people I feel nowadays become complacent because they can sit at home, watch TV there, and they don't leave the house. They don't do anything for themselves. They just do the normal 9 to 5. They don't even go down to the beach or even going to the shops and just walking around, like just basic things and doing something for yourself, because sometimes you need to just switch off from your regular routine and change it up a bit to get out there, because you might be at a networking event that you didn't want to go to, but then you also might meet a really good business partner or a life partner. It's a hard thing to exactly say. Like it's not until you get out there and start pushing yourself do you understand that there are better qualities to life than just chasing short dopamine at home by playing games or watching Netflix and things like this. It's taking the time to understand what you really like and what you want out of life. And it is hard to do things, especially when you work all week. And by the time the weekend comes around, a lot of places are shut. A lot of them are closed. So it's finding what you truly like to do. And sometimes that could be just like doing sewing at home or something small. And other times it could be doing extreme like water sports or adrenaline drive, adrenaline um, seeking activities like skydiving or jumping off cliffs and stuff like that with wingsuits, or what's the other one? Bungee jumping, which I've never do. So just a lot of those sort of activities. And sometimes it's not until you start exploring these sort of activities do you understand, yeah, I actually do like doing this. And you might meet people in similar sort of aspects that like doing the same thing. You might develop the friendships in which you need instead of just developing a friendship over the phone, which is a bit of a difficult one. Like I know personally for me and you, we've got a unique friendship only due to the fact that we're separated by a country. So that's the hardest part there. It's because I'm 3,000 miles away from you, I think 4,000 miles away, and that's not a short flight either. So it's understanding that sometimes it is good to have online friendships, but it's also good to have ones in person, places you can go with people and just to sort of unplug and just sometimes listen to their problems rather than your own, because sometimes listening to another person's problems or another person's life can help bring insight into your own problems and give you the lessons in which you never knew you needed. So, you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I was taking note, literally, of the things that you mentioned. So I actually am a shy extrovert. So I'm a little bit of a different combination. So I'm that person in the room that will hang out towards the food and have people come to me, but I love the energy in the room and getting to meet people. So I let people flow to me, unless I'm taking somebody else around and introducing them, and then I can take on that role and I am less shy. Um, as far as like what a person can do to meet people, you're exactly right. When you have to go out there, you got to put yourself out there and be at events or activities that you like to do where you're going to meet people. However, one of the things that a person can do, let's say they're a shy extrovert like me, and so walking up to somebody and talking to them might be a little bit on the hard side, is let your family and friends know that you're looking to meet individuals, and let them know what kind of person you're looking for. Sometimes the best relationships happen through introductions from family, friends, or coworkers, where they will take the pressure off of the introduction, because they will have a reason of introducing two people together. And then, so you got this third person. So it's much easier to have this conversation that way and then see where it goes. So I think that that's a great way. And honestly, you can meet people in so many different places. You can even meet people. I get laughed at probably for sharing this, but you can meet people at the grocery store, the convenience store. You just come up and have a conversation. I talk to people all the time and have conversations. And I'm like, wow, that was a really interesting person. I'd like to, get to know them more, and just random. So be open to exploring random possibilities by just saying hello. Most people are not
But
going to run away with hello.
that's exactly it. Like the other day at work, that I met a lovely gentleman, and he sort of put things into perspective, because I want to get out there and I want to find someone to settle down with and potentially have a kid or two of my own. And I feel I'm getting a bit old, even though that's only 27. So, but he put things into perspective, and he said he didn't have kids until he was 37. And he's 51 or something now. And he's got a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old, and like a 4-year-old. And it's understanding that you don't have to be a specific age to have a family. Like, it is better when you're younger because it is easier. But he sort of helped me understand. But we had a pretty lengthy conversation, and just sort of, there was a connection out of the blue. He knew of where I grew up out west, and it was 5-6 hours away, and he moved to the coast, and he had a lot of things going for him, and he quite understood that a lot of guys want an intimate connection. They don't want lust. We want intimacy at the end of the day. We want someone to be able to sit down on the couch with, and like watch a movie or go for a walk along the beach, or just do basic things, and even be a hopeless romantic. Buy them flowers or bring them something to lunch. Or even cancel the day off work to go do something spontaneously, like just doing things like that breaks the monotonous routine. So that's where I said to him, that's the one thing that guys want nowadays, is just an intimate connection with someone. And finding that intimate connection is extremely hard nowadays, because guys, we only get chosen when a female feels like it, unless they actually know us and there's a connection there. A lot of times you get judged on your appearance, and it is the same for females. Like, guys will judge a female on their appearance, but they're more likely to receive 10 times more attention than a guy. So it's definitely harder to get out there and sort of be confident, because a lot of times you just get rejected. And it might not necessarily be because they got a boyfriend. It could be just because they're having a shit day. They've had something happen in the family, and they just like, no, I don't want to do it. Like, don't want to deal with this shit. Or they could be because they've had previous trauma, and they've dealt with certain relationships that have just shut them off from the world. And it's trying to find where some of these people are, whether it be male or female, and where they sort of congregate. Because I've got a good mate who, she found her husband at work. So they worked together in the early days, and they sort of get to knew one another, and they've been married now for 5 or 7 years, and together for 10. And it's absolutely beautiful with what they have. And it's just understanding that sometimes you might not necessarily meet that perfect girl on a dating site. You might meet them, as you sort of said, getting out to the shopping mall or going to these sort of places and just asking, like just saying, well, could I get your number, and just potentially striking up a conversation from there. And it's not until you start to push yourself into these sort of environments. And that's what old mate, to circle back to, old mate that I was talking to, he said just getting out there more. So, and he's still trying to find someone to settle down with, because the person who was the mother of his children, they ended up splitting apart, partially because she was a psychologist, but also a narcissist, and had some underlying issues there. And it just made too much of a rocky relationship. So he ended up leaving that relationship, still participating in the kids' lives, of course, but trying to find someone who just wants him from him, someone who wants to spend time together and doesn't want any bullshit or any fluff, so to speak. And it puts into perspective that it's never too late to be able to find someone and settle down with. So if he's able to do it at the age of 37, then you can definitely do it at the ages of 25 or 30 or 35. It's just putting yourself out there and understanding these sort of things.
So honestly, taking the pressure off a person, and not, like I was saying, following a certain timeline or a certain order. is really important. And there is no such thing as the perfect partner. They might have some of the characteristics that you really want to have, and be that person in life that you share some things with, but no one person's going to fulfill everything that you need to be happy. So that's why they say that you gotta, be happy yourself, and that when you're with another person, it's that bonus part that you get to be with the person. That's really important. And another thing I wanted to add is, really, when you're going out and meeting people and putting yourself out there, don't put so much attachment on the outcome, and counting the number of days before they call you back or text, or if they don't, or don't play those silly games. And I wanted to share too, that I think it's really important for men and women not to get wrapped up into who needs to lead and wait for things to happen in a certain way. There's nothing wrong with a woman being interested in a man and asking for his number or to see him, because I think it takes some of the pressure off. There's a lot of pressure on a man to have to go up to a woman and there's that high chance of rejection. Well, if there's a woman out there that feels comfortable in who she is, and has no problem asking a guy out, I think that's great. I spent a long time going on dates because I would do the asking, because I didn't want to wait around for someone to ask me. If I thought someone had a good conversational style about them, so they could go into a conversation, or we shared something in common, I didn't think anything of asking, and I was successful in doing that. I actually didn't get asked out a lot. And so if I waited around for someone to ask me to get interested and curious, I wouldn't get to go anywhere. So that put it on me to take control of the situation, and not wait around. And I think that both sexes should, if put yourself out there, take a risk. And if you get to be friends first before it builds into something else, I told my kids that, be friends first, because anything else can go away. If you can't even be a friend to your partner, then what's going to happen when things get hard and get challenged? And that could.
That's the best relationships, is when they're best friends but also lovers.
Mhm.
It's being able to be around each other all the time, but also understanding sometimes you might need time apart. And to add back to what you were saying before of not waiting till they text, it's understanding that there's different types of people out there. There's overthinkers and people that have been had things happen in their life, and sometimes they overthink, or they hang on the next text message or the next call because um, of how they are and who they are. And it's something that's an interesting phenomenon, because there's people out there that are fiercely independent and stuff, and that don't text very often or don't communicate, and they end up being with a bit of an overthinker or someone who's had previous trauma. So they need that reassurance that nothing is going on the side. They need that extra attention because they weren't shown that extra attention. So they became a bit of an overthinker, or they might be a bit ADHD, and they might have some underlying issues. And it's understanding who you are fundamentally and what characteristics you have, so that way you can best advise the person when you're feeling these sort of feelings. Like you might say, I've been feeling a bit distant. Has there anything been going on between us? Like, do we need to sit down and have a conversation and talk about things? Or it could be as simple as you just don't have time for each other because each party's working. And by the time you both get home from work, you're both mentally drained and physically drained. And sometimes it could be just setting aside time once a week just to talk to one another, just to catch up on things, see how yous are going, and actually genuinely care. Because sometimes it's good to just touch base, because there's couples out there that will be together, but they won't be together, so to speak. They will work together, they'll live together, but they don't actually care for one another. The love there is sort of faded away. And I believe a honeymoon phase should never be a phase. The honeymoon phase should be something that forever lasts through a relationship. You should always be happy, be giddy, be willing to do new things or try new things out with that person, because as soon as you feel the honeymoon phase has ended, one of the parties or both of the parties have stopped actually investing in the other person, have stopped doing things for the other person, and trying to just make them happy. Because a lot of times you'll have couples out there, and that's something I've seen too, is they've been together for 10 years or 20 years and they haven't slept together in the bedroom for 5 years. They haven't done anything intimate for that time. Or the other one is the difference between actual connection and just going to the bedroom for the tedious task. Sometimes it could be having intimacy in the bedroom requires connection outside of the bedroom. Understanding that you need to have that sort of connection outside for you to feel something inside the bedroom, because it's easy to be disconnected from that whole thing and just be like it's another monotonous task. But it's not until you start to get to know one another and you continue these activities of going to a waterfall or going to different places and just having fun and just exploring and being in love with the person in which you're with, um, and understanding that sort of love will translate into different aspects, whether it be raising kids or being around other people or family members. There's so much to unpack in and of itself of relationships, and it's something that I'm still studying further and trying to understand. It's not something that I've only just started studying this in the past week, in the past 4 or 5 days, and it's an interesting phenomenon to sort of listen and understand. And like for a lot of guys today, the barrier to entry to be with a woman is a lot higher, but also it's a lot harder, but a lot easier. So for guys, we've now since the modernization of the how do I say this nicely? The modernization of pretty much sex, better word for it, is guys have never had more access to certain things. With Tinder and other apps like that, it's allows for disconnected intimacy, or not, it's disconnected lust, not intimacy. Before 20, 30, 50 years ago, guys had to put work into themselves to be like to build themselves up, to make them worthy of being in these relationships. But nowadays, you could just download an app and sleep with anyone. And it requires a lot less work, but it's also a lot harder to find that intimate connection. So it's both easy yet extremely hard. And it's understanding that sometimes you need to work on yourself first before you attract the type of partner in which you want. You could be attracting, like a person could be out in the dating game for 2, 3, 5 years and be attracting the same partner and not realize that it's them who needs to change and become better in order to attract a different type of partner. And it takes time to learn these things, to understand them. And you can shortcut this process by learning, by pushing yourself, by listening to experts in that type of field. Um, there's one amazing lady that I've been listening to recently who's a female relationship psychologist coach, and she covers a lot of things in depth. And her name's Sadia, and she's got amazing insights because she coaches men and women, but mostly men, and she sees a lot of these underlying issues with guys at this present point and how they're suffering. They need some sort of connection, but they haven't been willing to work on themselves, or they're in the wrong place. They're looking in the wrong areas for these types of women. You don't necessarily want to go down to a pub if you want a high class lady, because if you want someone who's genuinely nice and very reserved and very introverted, you have to look in those unfamiliar spots. You have to be putting yourself out there and understanding that most of the ladies at the pub, they're extroverted. They like to have a bit of fun. They might be a bit more promiscuous than someone who's a bit more introverted and someone who's a bit more closed off and hasn't had that many partners. There's so many things to touch upon here, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Oh, there's plenty to talk about. You've only been studying for a week. You've been doing great. So wherever you're studying, you're doing great. Um, you touched on so many themes, and I wrote them down so I could hit each one. And so one of the things that you were talking about is not allowing the honeymoon phase to be the reason why you'd be disconnected over time. So remembering why you even got with that person in the first place, and doing things that are spontaneous and fun, and making it I want to say making it a game, to some extent, to find things that add that spark. There's many things that you could do, even the little things that don't even cost anything. Those are some of the best ways to add interest.
Which remembering what you've done in that honeymoon phase. So if you've left the
Yes.
honeymoon phase, it's remembering that shit, I used to take her uh, at breakfast in bed, or I used to make her lunch, or I used to like do like these certain activities beforehand, and all of a sudden you stop doing them, and you didn't realize that these have an impact on the overall relationship. And it's getting back to what you've done in those first 6 to 12 months again. It could be booking dinner dates and going out to places, going to a movie, going for hikes on mountains. And like sometimes life does intervene and it stops you from doing certain activities like work schedules and things like this, different types of commitment. So it is hard to plan around either partner's life, because one partner might be working 9 to 5 and the other one might be working 5 to 9. So then it's extremely hard to have those close, intimate moments. And it's understanding that sometimes there might need to be a compromise of we've got to only do things on the weekend. Because by the time one partner gets home, the other one's walking out the door to go to work, and they're both like they're disconnected in the weekdays. And it does take time to work on these things to overcome them. And it could be as simple as sitting down with the partner and asking, well, is this truly the job that you want to do? Is this your goals and this is where you want to be? And it could be no, but they're required to do it just to keep money coming in. And that's where on those weekends you could be working together to um, start your own business or help either partner transition into a better work style or a better work flow. So that way you have more time on those weekdays to spend together. Because there's nothing worse than when you're working all day, every day, and you get home and that partner's not there because they've gone to work themselves. And by the time they get home, they're jumping in bed and you're pretty much waking up from bed. And it's that difference in time schedules that can be a very, very big drain on the relationship as well. It can feel very just monotonous and feel like it's the love isn't there, even though it is. It's just because you're disconnected from the lack of time together. So, but I'll let you continue.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's what it is. And so it takes two people realizing that they need to stay in communication if they're going to figure out, instead of living side by side or going through the motions or, rinse and repeat, the only way to get out of that is to have those conversations and to figure out times of the day where maybe the person, because like, you hit that one, and a lot of times couples have different schedules. And so it's like, there is that tiredness factor, that is that running off out the door thing. There's other things that come up, but it's like figuring out when you're not going through that, having that conversation, like, how can we spend a little more time together? Oh, well, we got 10 minutes in the morning, so let's just do something during that time. And, you talked about like different styles of attachment. And so, that doesn't go away even in long-term relationships. Sometimes you're going to find that one person has the secure, or they could have the avoidant, or they could have the oh, I'm trying to think of the third one now. I'm trying to go down the line of all of them, or the fearful. The people are always going to leave, and so those dynamics are still there to stay. And so the reassurance on any attachment style is really important. And, even when you're forming new relationships, I advocate for let a person know what attachment style you are. Not that you have to like dissect and analyze the person, but it does help to know that if you're a person that's more of that, hold on for dear life, and you need that constant assurance that that you're not going to leave the person, or if you're that person that needs more space because you have an avoidant and a person that's anxious, you get those two together, you have got quite the dynamic of a relationship, and it can come to head in a bad place really quickly. However, people that have those dynamics, they actually talk about what they need from the other partner, and they explain it in a way the other person can see when they're not in a dynamic where they're doing the dance and wondering what's going on. You can find ways to communicate. I've seen it done. I coach on this particular topic, and it's amazing how much that just sitting down and having an honest, open conversation, you're going to have to get brave. You're going to have to be vulnerable. And when you do that, though, it just takes away all of these like assumptions, and then you can have ways that when you are feeling this, one of those things, like you're wanting more space and the person's just grabbing onto you for dear life, you can have words or phrases that you can use and say, you know, I need some space here. I'm feeling a little bit like things are being forced and I can't do that. That's just making me want to run the other way. And I know that I don't want to be running the other way. I want to run towards you.
That's exactly it. It is hard when you've got a difference in personality. So one person might be fiercely independent and is used to being alone, used to doing things alone by themselves, and the other person is alone, but they like closeness and they like intimacy. They like to be affectionate, and it can be hard for those types of partners, but it is exactly right when they sit down and communicate these things, and it's communicating them in the right sort of order, in the right way, and saying, it's just, I've been feeling like we're living on top of each other. We just need to, I just need to take a bit of time for a few hours and just zone out. It could be just you going to read a book by yourself. It could be you going to somewhere and doing something for yourself or by yourself, or it could be necessarily not even being by yourself, but use both going for a walk and just not really saying anything, just absorbing the moment and understanding that this is time for um your brain to sort of unwind and stuff. And for me, I'm an overthinker. I'm a very big overthinker that's ADHD mentally, so I'm very much wired, and that's where it's understanding who I am, how I am, and bringing that to the table once there's a not so much a problem, but you can sense there's something that might happen. It's just sitting down with that person and saying, well, at times, if I feel like a bit too much, just tell me to back away a little bit, and I'll give you a bit of space. Like, it's having that understanding of yourself. And I guess I don't know if self-respect is the right word, but understanding that there are times in which you'll need to be by yourself. Not always will I be able to sit there, and I'm not always 100% because there's times when I'm introverted and there's other times when I'm extroverted, but at the same time, I'm still learning and growing and maturing in different ways. So you might meet someone and then 10 years down the line, they could be a completely different person. And it is sometimes hard because they're finding themselves, and it does take time for someone to find themselves truly. And it's not until maybe they have kids do they sort of have their eyes open to what they truly want. Things like this. There's so many things to touch upon, but I'll let you go back to what you were talking about. Sorry.
Oh, you're great. I love what you're bringing up here. The self-care. That's self-respect, self-care to be able to advocate for your needs. A lot of us don't do that because we have been taught or been brought up that your needs are not to be brought to the table. You're supposed to serve and help other people. And really the best thing you can do is to care for yourself and to advocate for your needs. And the only way you can do it, people aren't going to know what's on your mind. You're going to have to speak to it. And let's see, I had one other thought. It's kind of left me for a second, but it'll come back.
Oh, that's okay.
There was a second thing you spoke to, not advocating for your needs. And what was the second thing you said? I wanted to speak to it.
Oh, I don't remember. It could be that taking time for oneself, like going to do something, going to yeah, do that sort of thing. Just saying to the partner that I just need a bit of time, like feel like we're on stepping on each other's toes, but always around each other. And it's finding that right balance for you, because you could be with someone that enjoys being
Oh,
around each other 24/7, or you could be with someone that enjoys being around you for half the day because they've got things they like to do by themselves. So I see you
okay.
got the thought back though.
Yes, the thought came back. And so one of the things you had said is that over time, you're going to learn about yourself. So is your partner. And so you're going to evolve. So certain things about your character and who you are is going to stay the same, but your interests and maybe how you approach things is going to evolve as you go through that trajectory. And the one interesting thing that I have experienced in my own journey is that there will be times where you might be ahead of that journey than the other person, and you're trying to bring them along and they're not wanting to go along. But there's also going to be times where they're ahead of you on the journey and they want you to come along. And so just remembering that there are going to be some changes in the relationship because of the different experiences, and being open and willing to have those conversations, because a lot of times you get so wrapped around how you see the world that you forget that other people don't see it the way that you do. And by not having the conversation or shutting the other person down, then you're not going to get, access to that person being able to explain it to you in a way that you could see. Because a lot of things, when you actually go into the conversation in a healthy, you know, way where you're actually really truly getting open and curious and not trying to judge, shame, blame, or to project anything out on the other person, you can learn a lot. But you have to be willing and open to going to that place. And at the end of the day, you may not agree with your partner on certain things. You may not see it in the same way, but at least you have a better lens of why they maybe have a feeling about something. And I think that that's important, because you don't want to be in a relationship where everything is all down the middle, 50-50, everything's the same. And that you have
It's more
more.
so lifting them up so that one person may be
Yes.
30% on one day, the other one needs to be
Mhm.
70, and it's understanding these dynamics, but also working on yourself constantly. There's a couple that I know of that have just recently split apart because one partner didn't know how to grow, didn't know how to accept what was and understand that he needed to fix a lot of things. And the other one knew where she was going in life, and they simply just split apart because a breakdown in communication, but also he never found his true self. He never realized who he was and how he was. And it's not until they've split up, because they were together for 18 years. They've got kids and everything like that. And they just noticed a lot of tension in the past 12 months, and that's when things come to head. And they've been apart now for 3 months, and he's only just started to work on himself, but he still doesn't want to acknowledge a lot of either the mistakes, the shortcomings, or the lack of communication on his part. Like, it is always, whenever there's a breakup or a split up, it's both parties are equally involved. Not always, like sometimes it'll be person cheating, and that's 100% that person's fault for the way in which it's ended. But there's other times when it's just a simple breakdown in communication. And if you don't recognize these signs and symptoms, then it can be your fault because you're not addressing them. You could be like, well, we used to talk every week, or every night before we'd go to sleep, and just touch base and see how we're going, and talk to one another. And now we don't even talk for like a month. And it's addressing them in a tactful way of saying, well, I really would like to go back to talking, like just asking each other. And it could be that you need to initiate these types of activities again, because it could have been that other partner was initiating it all the time, and she felt like she was putting in all the work. And it's not until you've understood that she's backed away because she felt like you weren't doing enough of that sort of activity. And now you've understood it and you've realized it. Now you can bring that energy back into the relationship and instigate these sort of events and say, well, I want to go back to talking every night or every week and just seeing how one another's going, seeing how we're feeling, seeing if there's any areas we need to improve. And then you'll often find, because you've sat there, you've analyzed the relationship, you've realized there's a degradation, or there's a bit of a uh just the relationship's lacking. The relationship isn't what it used to be, and it's understanding these shortcomings and coming to the table with clear communication and saying, I know we haven't been talking much, but I would like to start talking more. And I realized a lot of the times that you were the first one to sort of ask these, and you were doing a lot of it. And now I realize that I need to be doing this sort of activity a lot more, or just talking with you. So that way she feels like her efforts are worth it. She can see that she's been giving everything she's been given, she's starting to get back because he started to realize what he's been doing. You can only maintain 100% love and affection for so long before it starts to teeter off, because if you're not getting that reciprocation of that love and affection or that time spent on one another, then one party tends to sort of distance themselves, to separate themselves. And that's when there can be that breakdown in communication, because they're not saying, I feel like I'm doing all the work here, or I'm the only one doing this sort of thing. And it's being an adult about it, understanding that it could be because the other partner just is ignorant to the fact, or it just doesn't know. Like, it's hard to fully say. You might assume that, oh, he doesn't care about me, or he doesn't this. So it could be that he's just too busy with stresses in life, or he's going through a lot of things to be able to sit down and actually talk about these things. Because he's used to the other partner initiating it, and now that he has to initiate it, it's something new for him. It's something out of his comfort zone. So there's so many things to touch upon here.
Just real quickly, I will say that anytime either person assumes anything, it's gonna be wrong. And most people don't want to go into conversation because they are thinking about how the person is gonna react. And really, the moment you go into a conversation and you express you have a good intention or a desire to come to a certain place, and you say, can we talk about this? I'm coming from a good place. And because I want this for us, how can we do this together? Will you join me in this conversation? You do that. Most people aren't going to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. Just get away from me, They're going to be like, oh, this person cares. They're coming to me to have a conversation and they actually want to know how I feel or think about something. Oh, yeah, I'm going to participate. But that's the one thing that a lot of us fear is going into that conversation because we're worried that we're going to hurt the other person, anger the other person, we're going to lose the other person, we're going to push the other person away, we're going to be overbearing and needy. The list goes on for all these different things. And that is something that a lot of us had to learn, is how to advocate and speak for our needs and invite the other person on the other side to be a part of it, because it's not a one-sided thing. It never is. A relationship takes two or more people. And so in order to keep the relationship, in order, you gotta nurture it, you gotta water it, you don't get to let off the gas and not take part in that and think that it's always the other person that's causing it to degrade. It's usually not. And I will find, even in friendships, I found that there was one friendship, I did all the planning, all the getting together, and the other person really loved that part about it because they didn't have to do it. And I'm thinking, why is it always me doing this? Why, whatever. And it was with one of my female friends. And then we talked about it, and she just like, I really love it when you put it together, you bring us all together. I just love that about this. And then since I had the understanding that it wasn't because there was a lack of interest or they were trying to take the easy way out, but they loved what I brought to the the friendship, that all things were better.
That's where I'm glad you touched upon this, because the things that we've been talking about, yes, it's about relationships and being with a partner, but a lot of these fundamental things that we've talked about can be applied to friendships as well. Having clear and open communications, and also with what you just touched upon there, is playing to your strengths, where that person that you were with and you're planning everything for, the reason you might be better suited to planning is because you're more methodical. You've got the better mind for planning, where they're more chaotic. They don't know how to plan things, or they get too much anxiety. It's playing to the strengths, and even if that other person can never plan things, it's bringing what their strengths are to the table. So, but there's still the same sort of energy being put into that relationship, that friendship, and even it could be for like relationship wise, it could be that one person's always instigating dinner dates and stuff and organizing these types of events, and it might be that the other person may need to start instigating other types of things, or it could be being more spontaneous or romantic. It's trying to find what complements what the other person is doing, how what you bring to the table helps elevate what they're doing as well. So, and it takes time to understand these things. It takes just time really to understand a lot of it. So, and that's where I'm still learning a lot of this stuff about relationships. It's only been like 4 or 5 days, and I've got a long way to go. But with what I've learned so far, it's allowed me to have a deep understanding and insight into how relationships work and how to be the right type of person or the right type of man or woman for a partner out there, and how to find one. So it's just, never giving up and being willing to get out there nowadays. So is there anything you'd like to touch upon before we sort of close it off for the day?
Oh, I just like how you brought it full circle about how everything we've been talking about. Yes, we've been talking about partnerships, but it applies to all types of relationships. Communication, when you do it effectively, builds good relationships. And if you build good relationships, you can do a lot of great things together, learn and grow, and have everyone's best interests at heart. Because at the end of the day, Isn't that what we all want?
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I don't think I've got anything else to touch upon. We'll explore this topic more in the future. Once I've learned some more things, got more things to bring to the table, of course. But yeah, I hope everyone's thoroughly enjoyed today's episode on relationships and how to navigate them, how to deal with them and understand them and become better from them. So I hope you all the best, and we'll see you in the next episode.